I love the song that you played. That song always moves me to tears. I'm going to look like a teenager here because I don't have a printer that works, so I've got this on my phone. I'm sorry. And Tracy, you so captured the enigma of your sister. I loved everything you said. So, since Terri left the house in February, I've had a kind of a non-stop dialogue in my head. I've become a bit of a mutterer. Her presence is actually constant to me at the moment. I'm sorry I'm looking at my phone, but these are my notes. I always want to tell her what's going on in my day. My name is Ryle, and I met Terri later in our lives through Marin Rowing Association. And she and I had the distinction of doing our last competitive row as a stern pair at the head of the Charles. And I delight thinking of our chitter chatter as we trained for that and as we rowed in that and then put our oars away. I will remember our conversations clearly. I always want to call her. She's still in my favorites list of my contacts, and I always want to call her and say, God, I'm struggling. I'm having to draft some words for a dear friend who's gone. I talked to her a lot, and I feel very lucky that I got to know her because we were very different. She stealthily came into the boathouse. All of a sudden she was just in the program, and I turned her, it's like, who are you? You know, she kind of furtively snuck in and took a seat on an erg, and she was there, and she was rowing with us, and that was her way. She was an introvert, and she was shy, and so our friendship was very unlikely because I'm not shy. My detractors would have a lot to say about, I like to think I'm a chatty Cathy, but we forged a very unlikely bond and friendship, and I was very lucky. I had been trying ages to get a full-time job, and I was freelancing, and actually had quite an open schedule. I didn't get my full-time job until well into her medical journey. So we got to spend a lot of time together. We rode bikes to her appointments. Like we would go to, Mission Bay, and she'd say, let's take the ferry. Like, what? And she'd say, let's take the ferry and let's ride bikes to Mission Bay. And it's like, we came so close to getting smacked by a car that one day. But she was very adventuresome, to your point. She just was whimsical in that way, and I loved it. And although she was an introvert and she didn't glean energy from others, she was so smart, and her wisdom was endless. And she would come to my house for dinners because I would just say, come on over. We play hearts. She's like, I haven't played hearts, and I'd love to do that. Played board games. In not knowing my kids for very long, she got the essence of them so acute, so sharply. It was extraordinary. She really was such a powerful observer and got people, and I loved that about her. We had wonderful conversations about books, about politics, about boathouse drama. Our friendship started out as we were movie pals, Sue, you're my movie pal too, but we watched a lot of movies. She was curious. She was so curious, and I loved all of our conversations that we had, and although as she was going through her bit at the end with her sarcoma, we enjoyed more of the everyday things. We touched briefly on kind of what laid ahead, and in those conversations she spoke of her family and the devotion of her family and her mom and her sister and Mary, and how, you know, it was a heavy burden on them, and she was so grateful, you know, to them, and being able, you know, she knew they were doing heavy lifting, and she's like, well, that's family, and but she was so appreciative of that. We didn't talk about kind of the end, but what I admired most about her is there was no self-pity, there was no why me, this is unfair. She was so dignified in her approach to it all. I walked. She was determined to stay strong and fit and physical in that very competitive way that she rode bikes with you. And she said, I want to do, I forget how many miles she said she wanted to walk every day. And we would, at UCSF, there was on the floor, I mean, I think she said, she looked at me and she's like, I would like to do 40 loops today. And I said, okay. It's like, all right. And she had her trolley. She was hooked up to an ungodly number of liquids that were pouring into her 24/7. She had her trolley and she's like, let's go. And we would literally, I was the counter. I had funny means of keeping track of our laps and loops. And we met many interesting people who were caregivers and patients, and Tracy. Terri got quite a reputation as being the very athletic rower who did these loops with a fierce determination that was a marvel to watch. Our coach, I met Terri through rowing, so our relationship was on the water, and as teammates we had a coach, Deirdre, who's here today, who's going to speak as well. And Deirdre always used to refer to rowers. She'd say, are you a rower with a capital R? And Terri was one of those rowers with a capital R. And when I think of her now, she was a human with a capital H. Like she was a delightful person who was so misunderstood by many because of her quiet, shy nature. I feel so fortunate to have blasted beyond her shyness and her introverted ways. And we just enjoyed a very unexpected friendship that I will cherish. And people come in and out of your lives through your whole life. And while it's fun at the time, you move on through a decade, and it's like they kind of leave your memory. But Terri will not leave. Terri was, for such a quiet person, she has left a very big mark on my psyche. And we did a lot of dog walking with Max here, and we all over Marin, all over these trails, and in the marsh today for the people who were rowing. The marsh across the San Quentin was our favorite spot because Max loved the bunnies there, and we did a lot of parking behind Trader Joe's and walking the dogs, and I miss her deeply. And this is a beautiful celebration of her life. I just, the mermaid picture I've never seen before, but seaweed in her hair and the water lapping up as we all reminisce is just a lovely touch. So thank you. I'm just very grateful to have been a part of her life, and that's it.